So again, today's session is about revealing the magic in your photography using Topaz Adjust. Adjust gives you the ability to beautifully reveal detail, color, and awesome dramatic contrast very quickly with just a couple clicks within that program. Even when you're dealing with photographs that when you first look at might be underexposed, might not have the best information to work with, and might just be a little bit dull, you can really pull a lot out of those images and truly reveal a lot of awesome stuff. So that's what we're going to be covering today. The first image that I'm going to use is here on the screen, and the only thing that I've done to any images that we cover here today are going to be just cropping and a little bit of rotation, just so you can see exactly what I did here already. Here's where I started, and I just wanted to get rid of some of these elements on the edge, get my car right in the middle, so I cropped it down to this image here. This image was taken in Panama on New Year's Day, and because it was New Year's Day, it was a very strange moment on the streets of Panama area, and it was empty. There just were no cars and no people, and the day before it was so crowded. So as we went down the same street that I'd gone down the day before, I went ahead and grabbed my camera really quickly and just took a snapshot out of the window of my car. I was riding along. I didn't have the ability to stop. Well, I noticed on the viewfinder right away in the histogram that it was a really dark image, so I tried to immediately adjust my camera settings, but by the time I was able to do so, we were onto another street and I wasn't in the same area. So I brought this image back in, and one of the programs that I knew could really help to work with this image was Topaz Adjust. Topaz Adjust does wonders for things that have lower exposure like this, where you're kind of blocking up those shadows and losing some of that detail, contrast, and color in those darker areas. And it does it very quickly. So we're going to use this image first. I'm just going to go ahead and go into Filter, Topaz Labs, Topaz Adjust, and I'll get directly into the program. If you're not familiar with Topaz Adjust, I'll do a very brief interface introduction, and then we're going to move on to the tools that will help you really bring certain things out in your imagery. Over on the left-hand side is where you're going to find your preset collections. Adjust, along with many of our programs, come with a ton of default presets for you to instantly apply to your image. So if you're looking for something that, let's say, has an HDR type of an effect, which Topaz Adjust is known for being able to quickly give with just one image, you can click on that HDR collection. You'll see the presets below. You can scroll over them and actually just see how it's going to apply to your image. It's going to give you a little preview, or you can jump into our quick grid mode, which will let you see all of those presets within that particular collection. So you can choose one. Maybe I want to go with Heavy Pop Smooth. Click on that. It's going to be applied to my image, and I'm back in the main interface. Now I'm just pressing spacebar to see the before and after, and you can see how that preset applied. Same thing goes with the rest of the collections as well. If I want to take a look at my film collection, I can quickly do that and see some interesting film presets that might work for this image as well. Maybe I want to go with something a bit more dramatic, like a Lomo preset. So I'll click on that, and it's applied to the image. We have some basic menu options and ways to save, delete, export, import your presets. Down in the menu, you have some preferences that are specific to whether you want live sliders or what type of grid options you'd like in your specific program on your system. So that is where you set any of those options and get to certain links for our Topaz page. In the main interface on the top left is where you're going to be able to see a split preview of your before and after. So you can click that. As you work and continue to adjust your image, it will update on the right-hand side, showing on your left-hand side the original for you. And you can move your navigator around here to get to where you'd like to see. I'm going to go back to our main interface, one image. Over on the top right of the main interface is going, or the main preview area is going to be our zoom levels. So you can come in here and let's go directly to 50% or 100% just to check out what's going on before and after. You'll see that zoom level reflected in the navigator over here on the right. Within the navigator next to that you have a loop tool. So let's say I don't want to view the whole image at 100%. I want to view the whole image within this one preview area, but I want to just check out this building here right in the middle down the street at 100%. I can go to my loop mode over here, click on that, then just click wherever I want to view at 100%, and you'll see over here on the top right that loop will change wherever you'd like to view it. Lastly, which I find really helpful, is our histogram. And this will tell you if you have some areas of your image that are blocking up in your shadows or your highlights, so you can adjust that and start to even out that histogram, and this is where you can view that. Below those three tabs are going to be all of your sliders and parameters where all of your tools to actually create the look that you're after are located. At the bottom of that panel is going to be your undo and redo buttons, the ability to just kind of go crazy and choose this randomizer, which will randomly change your your sliders all around, kind of give you some creative juices flowing in your head and maybe go a completely different direction than you thought of in the first place. Then we have something called our apply button, and I'll show you that here in just a moment as we go through this workflow, and then our reset button. Reset is going to get you back to your default slider positions, which is going to be 0 and not affect your image at all. So now that you have been introduced to the main interface areas, I'm going to go ahead and close this option over here on the left, close the panel, just so we have a little bit more room to work with while we come and take a look at the tools that are going to help you reveal the dramatic contrast, detail, and color that we were talking about at the beginning of the session. So within Topaz Adjust, we have three main tab areas: your global adjustments, your local adjustments, and your finishing touches. Majority of the time you'll find yourself doing the global adjustments first, then your local adjustments, and actually selectively applying or taking out the adjustments in your image in this brush area, and then going in and doing your last finishing touches. If you find yourself needing to apply some changes multiple times, you might go back and forth, but usually it's just from the top to the bottom. Within the global adjustments, you'll have your adaptive exposure. The top two sliders in there, the adaptive exposure and the region sliders, are going to be the most important sliders that you need to know about to reveal details, contrast, and some color pop within your image. This is the core technology of Topaz Adjust, and the way I like to explain it these days, instead of going into the super technical uses behind or technical algorithms and things like that that's actually going on, visually what's happening is it's breaking your image into certain regions. When your regions are at 1, it's looking at your entire image as one region, which most programs do. But with Topaz Adjust, you can break your image down into multiple regions. Now, however many regions you have selected, as you take your adaptive exposure up, Topaz Adjust is going to try to get a bright highlight, a darker shadow, and a good level or a good amount of midtones all in each of those regions. So if I have a region setting of 1, it's trying to do that in my entire image, which is a more basic exposure adjustment. As I take my region sliders up and break my image down into smaller and smaller regions, you'll see that you start to get shadows, highlights, and a good amount of midtones in more and more areas of the image. And this is what we like to call our localized contrast control, where it starts to pull out these really lovely shadows, nice highlights, and midtones, giving you detail in your shadows, detail in your main highlights, and detail throughout all your midtones. And so you can quickly open up your image like we just did here. Here's before, here's after. So that is the main technology that's going to get you started with Topaz Adjust. Now sometimes you will notice as you take these region sliders up and really break your image down into more and more regions, into smaller and smaller regions, and more kind of highlights, shadows, and midtones are pulled out of each individual region, you'll start to see a lot of grittiness come through. And we can tackle that within the detail area. But I think the adaptive exposure is the most important thing to know about how to reveal certain areas of your image. So I'm going to take my adaptive exposure for this particular image up fairly high, and then work with my region slider to kind of balance it out the way that I'd like. And I'm just going to play around until I get to a setting that I feel works for me with this image. And it's going to be about regions at 25. I like that. Take that adaptive exposure down just a bit, maybe about 0.67. So I'm pretty happy here. It's a little gritty for me, but we're going to handle that here shortly. One thing that you also should know about within the adaptive exposure to kind of work with bringing and revealing certain areas in the tone or certain details and dramatic contrast and things like that are the protect highlights and protect shadows. When your protect shadows are up, it's going to open up your shadows even more. And as you take that to the right, you'll notice that your shadow regions only will start to have more light in them. Sometimes it goes a little gray, and I tend to actually take that protect shadows down so I still get a nice little boost of black. But if you find yourself at a nice level overall for your entire image, but you still have some blocking up in your shadows, you can easily take that protect shadows up and get some detail and tone in there. Same idea for the protect highlights. Protect highlights are going to take your whites, your brightest highlights down, and add tone and color and detail back into them, and just protect those from clipping. As you take it all the way to the left, it's going to not protect them, so you'll see that they brighten up that much more. By default, both of these are at 0.02 for a reason, so those brightest highlights still have tone and those darkest darks still have some tone. But you can play with those to manipulate the way that different detail and tone is brought out in your image. We do have some contrast and brightness sliders as well here for you, so if you want to increase that overall brightness, you can easily do so from within the adaptive exposure tab. Below the adaptive exposure tab is the details, and here's where we're going to deal with some of this grittiness that came through that I'm not really loving the way that it's applying. Now, I will tell you that images that have a lot of detail and lines and texture to them, like the street scene we have here, really react very well to the global or the adaptive exposure adjustments, especially when you're trying to recover certain tones and detail like we are here. However, smooth areas such as skies, skin, things like that, or any high contrast areas between details and smooth areas like you see here with the building and the sky, don't react beautifully, but we have ways to deal with that in our local adjustments. I'm going to go ahead and brush that out selectively. But first I'm going to come down into my Details tab and say Process Details Independently. And what this is going to do is separate the detail adjustments from my adaptive exposure. By default, in the program, on the back end of the program, adaptive exposure not only works with your exposure and the contrast and that localized contrast effect, it also adds detail into those shadows and into those highlights to help reveal some of those areas that are kind of blocking up or clipping. So by default, that is connected for a reason, but sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you don't want that connected, so you can come down to this Process Details Independently, click that, and you're going to see, well, let's click the details on first, and now we're going to see, as I turn this on, an immediate smoothing. Sometimes it over smooths like this, but don't immediately just turn it back on, because what you can do is come up into your individual strength and detail boost detail sliders and add that detail back in selectively, or more independently, I guess, and get it to exactly the area that you want it. So if you want more of the detail boost, which is that gritty kind of texture type of detail, very small detail enhancement, you can do that versus an overall very strong, larger detail enhancement, which is going to give you a more affected type of look. But again, the idea is that you have an independent adjustment separate from your exposure. So you can come in and just work with that on your own. You can also keep it connected if you like what the program is doing automatically. And oh, well, now it's really over the top because we have the strength and boost on. I'm going to go ahead and click that back on because I like what we did independently. So I'll leave it right there and scroll back out. All right. So now we also have within the details the ability to sharpen up the image as well, and this is a more traditional unsharp masking technology within the sharpen radius and threshold sliders. So you can work with those sliders more, but within the details, really the way to bring out something that is more specifically brought out and adjust is through the strength detail boost sliders. At this stage, I would kind of go away from the initial workflow path that I told you in the beginning about just going from top to bottom. I'm going to jump down into my local adjustments and show you the brush out feature, which is really important in images like this, where you have a smooth sky that really starts to grunge up and dirty up, and it's not really helping the rest of your image. So in the local adjustments, you can go into your brush out, brush type. You also have dodge, burn, and smooth, but we're not working with those right now. We'll go to our brush out. And in the slider, or the brush sliders, we have brush size. I'm going to choose maybe about 700. The opacity, I'll leave that all the way at 1. I'm going to brush the entire adjustment out of our sky. The hardness level, I'll leave that right about 0.5. That's going to adjust the feathering of our brush, how feathered and soft the edges of the brush are. And then edge aware. Edge aware is really where a lot of the technology in this brush comes in all of our brushes. It's a color aware brush. So at 0, it's a dumb brush. It doesn't have any awareness of anything. It's just a regular brush, and as I brush over something, it doesn't matter if you brush over an edge or anything like that or separate colors. It's not going to recognize that. You can see over here on the thumbnail on the lower right that there's no recognition of lines or color or anything. It's just a regular brush. And as I make this kind of movement around the sky and building edge, it's not very exact and it's not specific. I'm going to step back in those movements here, or reset. And now I'll take my edge aware all the way to 1 and make those same movements, except making sure to keep the crosshairs of my brush, which is right there in the middle of my brush, on the blue of the sky that I want to adjust. Make sure that it doesn't go over into the roof line. Now you can see over on the lower right side just how specific I was able to get that quickly. It became very aware of the edges and nooks and crannies as I went through that process, and I was able to make and create a very exact mask very quickly. This is really helpful when wanting to brush out of these larger kind of smooth areas like this. I'm going to go ahead and take my edge awareness off and just brush through the rest of that sky area really quickly. And now here's before and after. It's only affecting the street and building at this point and is no longer affecting my sky. Now I want to move back up into the global adjustments on my color adjustments and work with bringing out some of the saturation in an intelligent way. However, I want to do it to my sky as well. But since I've brushed out the entire effect from my sky, at this point, if I work with my color adjustments, it's only going to affect, let me just show you, I'm taking my saturation up, it's only going to affect the street and the buildings, not my sky. The way to work with this within Topaz Adjust is to actually apply the settings before we go into our color adjustments. So if you're happy with the way that the adaptive exposure and detail adjustments are working on your image, which I am, I'm now going to go down into Apply and press that button. Make sure that you're happy where you are within your workflow before you press apply, because basically what you're doing is burning the adjustment that you see on your screen into your image, and that's going to become your new base image that the program will recognize and work on. So now I can press apply, and now I'm going to press reset all just to show you that my new base image is what we created with Topaz Adjust already. Now I can come up into my color adjustments and add some saturation, and you'll see it's affecting the sky, the whole image all at once. So that's where you would find the apply button to be really helpful. So in the color tab within global adjustments, you have your adaptive saturation and color regions. Adaptive saturation is a unique technology within Topaz Adjust as well, and you can kind of think about this adaptive saturation and region slider similarly to the adaptive exposure slider. Basically, what it tries to do is analyze your image and figure out where you might want to add saturation versus just adding it all over at the same level. So you can take your adaptive saturation up to a certain level. So let's say 0.4. It's analyzing the entire image as one region. And now as I take my color regions up, you'll start to see that more color is kind of locally brought out in a different way as you take that up. It's really obvious down here in the yellows and the greens in the kind of distant area of the street. So as I take that color region back down, you can kind of see how that affects the saturation differently as you change those regions. I tend to use the regular saturation and saturation boost sliders because they feel a little bit more, for me, in my workflow, they feel like they are easier to apply and let me independently apply them the way that I want. This is doing a lot of the work for me. So if you like those adjustments within that adaptive saturation, definitely take advantage of that. But the saturation and saturation boost does something similar in that you can increase the saturation, which is a regular saturation slider. It's going to apply saturation, increase to or decrease to your overall image without regard to the color or the level of saturation that it's already at. And then the saturation boost slider is my favorite slider in the color region. What it does is takes your lower saturated colors, so pay attention to things like the street or the grays, not the bright saturated colors, and it's going to bring those saturated or that saturation up to the same level as your higher saturated colors. So you have the opportunity to come in and work with your color and saturation and really bring those to life and reveal some of those colors that might be hidden within that kind of bad exposure that we were working with at the beginning. So here's before and after, and that's just with color exposure. You can also come in and change your hue as well within the color adjustment. You have a noise reduction slider within Topaz Adjust that will let you remove some of that grunginess or noise that is created when you do some heavier effects. I'm actually fairly happy with what's going on in the street, and I removed any of that kind of grunge from the sky already, so I'm not going to go into the noise. We also have a curve tool that is a traditional curve tool, and you can come in and use some of our drop-down presets here if you'd like to just, let's say, add some medium contrast or medium contrast 2, and then come in and work with that curve yourself. I'm pretty happy without it right now, so I'm just going to press reset all and close it on up. Now within my local adjustments, I can do things such as dodge, burn, and smooth, but I'm not going to do it within this particular workflow. I'm going to come down to my finishing touches and show you a couple of our finishing touches and then move on to the next image to show you we can continue to reveal some of the detail and color in the next one. So within our finishing touches, we have the ability to diffuse the light and give you kind of a diffuse soft effect. I find it works really pretty on portraits, kind of making the image glow. You can also add grain. If you find that you have an image that you're trying to get maybe a film look on or that has a little bit of grit in there as already, adding a monotone and consistent grain to the overall image can give you a really nice effect, kind of even out everything. Now this grain is fairly heavy that we just added, so I can take that grain contrast down and reduce the grain size to get a much finer grain that will just kind of even out any areas that might have a little bit of graininess or noise. It just kind of blends everything together a little bit better. And you can actually come in and add some grain color too to get some really interesting effects. The finishing touch that I use most often is our transparency slider, but I'm not going to use it for this particular effect because I really like what the street and the the street and buildings are looking like right now. so I'm not going to worry about that. But basically what it is an opacity slider that allows you to blend the effect that you have created back into the original base image. One thing to note is once you've pressed apply, again, that base image is that applied image. So the transparency, if I would go in there right now, really wouldn't do anything except remove some of that color as I take that, make it more opaque, and then I can bring it back. But that's how the slider works. It's quite effective if you find that you've gone a little bit over the top on your processing, or it just looks a little too strong and you don't want to go back up into your global adjustments and individually work with anything, then the overall transparency is really helpful. Warmth is a great slider, very simple slider just to add some warmth or coolness. I tend to go a little bit warm in my processing, so I like to come in and do the very, very gentle warmth there. Here's before and after. This helps control your temperature as well. So if you want to have a little bit more of a warmer yellow type of light coming in, you can use this warmth slider very quickly within Adjust. You can also add a border within Topaz Adjust if you're not familiar with it. It's a very simple border where you can just select the color. It's going to pull up a color picker for you, or you can pick the color from your image. So let's say I want to have a kind of maybe this green, this dark green border over here, or actually maybe this kind of sea green color. I can just click on that and it's going to be applied to my image. So a very simple border module here for you if you're interested in applying a border. Vignette is probably one of my other most commonly used tools within the finishing touches. Really just focuses your eye exactly where you want it to go, and you can do it very subtly or make it very affected. Just turning it on is going to give you a very, very nice soft border around the edges, and that's what I tend to use, is just the default one. So if I want to make that a little bit darker, I can always come in and take my strength to the left to go black, or I can actually take it to the right as well and go white. I'm going to go left and go darker for this one. Vignette size is just going to control the size of the focal area, or the area that doesn't have that darkening of the edges. The vignette transition is how hard that edge is going to be between the effect, which is the vignette, versus the image. So you can make it really hard or quite soft. And then you can also change the curvature here. You can go more oval shape versus more 90-degree soft square shape. The last is our tone, but I'm going to use a different image for this particular tone module. So let's just be done with this one. Let me show you before and after. Or actually, let me press OK here and show you the overall before and after, and show you what we were able to reveal from just that particular workflow. Here's before and after. I was able to bring out localized contrast, some really beautiful texture contrast and detail, and quite a lot of color as well that had been hiding in those shadows. Here's before and after. The next image I want to show you is an image that I use Adjust on all the time. I take MLS real estate photos occasionally, and Adjust is my go-to program for that. So if you are a real estate photographer or know of or like to take interior photos, architecture photos, Adjust is an amazing program for you to really even out the light quite well. So let me just make a quick copy of that layer. I'm not going to worry about cropping. I'll just go directly into my filter, Topaz Labs, Topaz Adjust. And this can be such a quick process if you are aware of the tools that help you reveal those areas that you want to bring out really quickly. So I'm going to press Reset All here and get back to my original image and go directly to my global adjustments into my adaptive exposure and just start taking that adaptive exposure up. As I take that adaptive exposure up, it does start to get a little strong in certain areas, but I want to get my point across on how quickly the exposure adjustments just within this one slider can transform your photo and reveal some things that were hiding there. So this was a fairly dark image that has a lot of shadows, But within those shadows are detail, color, and different things that you really can bring out. Now once you have your adaptive exposure up to a certain place, usually I tend to take my region slider up just to balance it out. And this is a really popular effect for real estate and MLS photos at this point. If you'll notice, sometimes as you take your region sliders up, when your adaptive exposure is this high, you'll start to see these kind of little patches of dark or light, or basically what it is it's the areas of contrast that are coming into play. Sometimes you'll have a lighter area that all of a sudden is getting really dark. And that's just because of the adaptive exposure technology. It's as you break those regions smaller and smaller, it's trying to pull a shadow into an area that shouldn't have a shadow. So a way to work with that is by taking your region slider back down and getting it just that really beautiful kind of spot where everything kind of melds together and evens out the way that you like it. Another suggestion I have for you at that point, if you start to see like we have over here next to the windows on this particular wall where it's starting to just kind of look a little over processed, is to work with your protect highlights and shadows at that point. So for me, I would take my protect highlights and shadows down, and it gives me a little bit more of a natural feeling to the image. And it's as quick as that. I'm actually not going to do much more here. I probably could quickly take my overall brightness up, overall contrast down, maybe grab a little bit of coolness because it's a bit warm to bring back some of that more natural light here, and maybe go into my color, saturate, oh no, not even my saturation, more my saturation boost to even out that saturation. Here's before and after, and an image that straight out of the camera might not be very inspiring and something that you look at and say, wow, that doesn't really have much potential, all of a sudden has been brightened, more detail, evened out, dramatic contrast, and is actually a usable photograph for showing off an interior of a home. Now, I would do a little bit more here just to kind of even out the tones, but again, just to show you how quickly you can really work with these settings and pull things out of the images that you might not have thought of otherwise. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out and go to the next image. Here is a great opportunity for us to selectively apply some of the settings, so I want to show you that process again. This image I love, but it kind of begs to be opened up here on the right hand side, and I always think when I look at this that I want to make that green moss just pop off the tree a little bit more and crisp up that detail because it's not super sharp, and Adjust can allow me to do all three of those things, work with that contrast, the detail, and the color. So it's a good program for this. I'm going to go ahead and do a Control J. You can do Command J on a Mac to get another layer. I'll press Reset All as we come in. And let's go over here to the left-hand side. If you are more of a preset fan, which I tend to be because I know the presets really well, you can quickly just come over to the collection that you're most interested in, open it on up, and say, okay, I really like, let's see, this Dynamic Pop 2. Click on that. It's did not apply. Maybe I didn't click on it. There we go. All right, so Dynamic Pop 2. Here's before, here's after. This opened up this tree a lot, really brightened everything up, but it didn't quite get me to a point where I like. So I'm going to go now to my Vibrant collection. Vibrant collection has a little bit more processing and effect than the Classic collection, which is going to be really somewhat, mostly subtle adjustments. The Vibrant collection really starts to play with your color and bring out some drama. But it's a fun collection to take a look at when you're looking to add detail, color, and open up the exposure. So I'm just going to scroll down, see if I see something that I like. And I saw something up at the top called Crisp. I'm going to click there. Yes, I like that much better. Here's before. Here's after. I love what's happening now to the tree. It's a little over processed to me. You really start to pull those, not over processed, but just kind of too affected for my taste. So instead of coming in and manipulating all of these sliders and trying to figure out what's causing that effect, I tend to just go to my finishing touches, transparency, clicking or taking my transparency up, just blending it back in with that original image to get me to a level that I like. And I like that much better. Here's before, here's after. Now I can come up into my color, maybe take a little bit of my saturation boost up to get some of those browns and greens to just really pop out, but not take too much of the overall saturation up. That's nice. Here's before and after. But here's where we run into the issue. Over here on the left-hand side, I love what's happening on the right-hand side, but over here on the left-hand side, you start to see this posterization effect and just a breakdown of the image information because we've taken a very smooth, a smooth area of the image and really, really brought it out like this. It's just not working. So one way to get rid of that is go back through our local adjustments brush out effect. And I know a few of you are asking me to cover that again, so here is that process. Local adjustments. If you go into that local adjustments tab, you have 4 adjustment types: the dodge, brush out, smooth, and burn. We'll go through the brush out and smooth in this particular effect. Actually, we'll just do the brush out for this one. I'll do the smooth for the next one. So I want to definitely get into one more image here with you. Oh, but I will do the dodge. Okay, sorry. I'm getting inspired. Okay, so with the brush out, again, all you need to do is choose your brush size. I'm going to go pretty big on this. Sometimes you think that when you have all these intricate details like this moss coming off the tree, that you'd actually want to have a smaller brush, but you're just making the process more difficult for yourself because we've included this technology that allows for you to just click on, for example, for this image, it would be the white or the brown areas. And it's not going to affect the green, so it won't take the effect out of that green, but you can quickly come in and not have to worry about doing really small brushes or intricate brush strokes. So I'm going to take my brush size up high, my opacity all the way to 1. We'll brush out the entire effect. The hardness I'm going to take up a little bit further than I normally would. And then the edge aware I'm going to take all the way up to 1 to make it a smart brush. I'm going to take my brush size up even higher because some of this moss is sticking out quite a bit. And now all I'm going to do is come through and go along the edge of this tree, just making sure that my brush doesn't go over or go into the green of the moss at all. And I'm just going on the background portion. Now, as we get down to the bottom, the color sensitivity isn't as, or the color, what's the word I'm looking for? The contrast between the background and the foreground isn't as strong up top, so you might have seen a little bit of an adjustment happen there, but we can work with that. Now I'm just going to take my edge aware down and do the rest of my background, and let's see what we're left with here. Over here on the right, you see how intricate that mask was able to get up at the top. As I said, it did kind of mess up down here, so let's go ahead and go to our eraser tool. And I'm just going to click right on the moss itself where it covered. Now please know that the eraser tool is not sensitive like the edge aware or like the brush out edge aware brush is. It's 100% just dumb brush. So now I can take my edge aware back up, go to my brush out, and do a more intricate adjustment here. And it kept a lot more of that intricate moss detail. So here's before, here's after. I was able to apply it exactly where I want to be. Now to show you a different brush, I'm going to go into the dodge brush because here I could see myself opening up these shadow areas just a touch more, and the dodge brush would be a good place to do, or a good tool to use that, so I don't have to go into my exposure adjustments and try to find a good balance between the areas that I already really like the exposure at and these shadows. So I'll just go to my dodge brush. I'll go click that and make sure that I'm using my dodge brush. I'm going to take my brush size, maybe about 400-ish. Opacity, I'm going to take down to about 0.2%. That's going to be about a 20% strength. I tend to always use a lower opacity when it comes to dodging or burning because it gives you a much natural transition between your brush work that you do versus if you do 100% off the bat, it's really obvious that you've gone in and darkened or lightened certain things. The hardness I'm also going to take down. Again, the softness is important when it comes to keeping a natural transition between the effect and what's not being affected. And I'm going to take my edge aware down to about 0.5. I'd like to not be super edge aware where it's only going to affect the let's say I'm on the black of the tree here. I don't want it to only affect the black. I'd like to have it affect the darker browns too, maybe even the mid-tone browns, but I don't want it to affect the greens. When you have your edge aware at a mid-level, that's really where you start to see that mid-range edge awareness become something that you could really use. Sometimes I'm either at 0 or all the way at 1, and I have people ask, well, when do you ever use it when it's at 0.5 or something like that? This is one of those reasons. So now I've opened up those areas using my dodge brush, but it's really obvious. So here's before, here's after. I'm almost seeing a little too much light coming into those shadows. Instead of going and saying undo or resetting my whole mask and going back through, I can come to this overall strength slider above the brush menu and take that to the left. And you'll notice that only my dodge adjustments are now being able to become more transparent and less transparent depending upon which direction I go. So I can easily come in and manipulate it a little bit further to get a more natural transition. So here's before, here's after. Really love Adjust for this type of work. I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to show you one more quick, let's see here, which one should we do? I'll work with this one really quickly because I felt when I took this image, this is the Panama Canal, and this is as a boat is approaching the Panama Canal. The other side, I'm looking to the left here. As you look to the right, you actually see the Bridge of the Americas. So this was looking to the left, and at the time I took it, I thought, this is going to be such an impactful photo. It had some beautiful light going on. The detail of the water was just really nice, especially just, looking at the viewfinder on your camera, you think, oh, this is incredible. But taking my camera raw photo back in, and it just lost a lot of its oomph. And what I thought was a really poppy, dramatic photo turned kind of bland. And Adjust was a program that I knew immediately would be able to not only help make it pop out, but give me some artistic tools as well to turn this into what I kind of envisioned at the time. It was very warm there with a lot of heavy humidity, and it almost looked like it was with the sun coming through, it was just such a warm atmosphere. And this really didn't capture that. But Adjust allows for you to get the pop, get the detail, really bring out and reveal some of the things that might be missing. Plus, at that point, you then get to add in some finishing touches. So we'll just go through that process really quickly. And we're going to go through the preset panel or the preset side to start us off because, again, once you know the presets and the ones you might like for certain effects, you'll just start to gravitate towards certain ones. And in the Vibrant collection, there are seasonal presets that I find are awesome. And it's not just because I helped create them, I just really love them. So Autumn is going to start to give you a warm, kind of orangey fall feeling to it and really give you some atmosphere that you might have been missing, as well as bringing out detail, giving you some more dramatic contrast and revealing certain things about it. So we have autumn, spring, winter, where you start to get that blue, of course, spring, where you start to get that more greenish coloring. But summer is really where I wanted to take this. And summer is more yellow and a brighter orange. So here's before, Here's after. So I really liked what the idea of that preset, and I do like what's happening, especially on the reflection, how instead of being a bright white, I'm now getting this really nice, beautiful yellow happening. I do want to increase the detail, increase the color, and bring out some of the aquas and the deep blues I was seeing in the water that I'm not seeing in the image in front of me. And I want to tame down the effect on the lower left of the image where that really brightly saturated green is just taking my attention. So with those goals in mind, I can come over here to my left-hand side, and let's start off with the adaptive exposure. I'm just going to maybe give myself a little bit more of a boost of adaptive exposure, which will give me a little bit more opening up of my shadows, as well as getting those highlights to clip a little bit less on the water. So close down some of those highlights. So I'm happy there. I'm going to leave my regions right about where they are. And I'm going to take my brightness just a touch down. I'm also going to not protect my highlights so much. Well, actually, I like those a little bit more. I thought that I wouldn't, but I do like it protected. Now I can come into my details, and this is where I can increase some of those details on the water that I'm missing. Number one, I see right off the bat that process details independently is unchecked, so I know that details are being processed with the adaptive exposure, so that's good. Now I can come in and add additional overall detail, a little bit of extra boost to really start to bring out some of the detail in the water. Color now is where I can really bring out some of the color in the water. I'm going to take my adaptive saturation and color regions down. It's just not my personal favorite tool because I don't really have a good control of how it's applying to my image. So instead I'm going to come into my saturation and just take my saturation down from 110, which was giving me this really bright saturated lower left-hand corner. Take that down, and only worked with my saturation boost, which as I take that up, I have a feeling it's going to, yes, it really will start to bring out some of those blues and greens that are hidden deep down in that water. It also started to bring out that lower left again, so I'm actually going to take that saturation, overall saturation down a bit. I think what I'll do is I'll end up painting that out. All right, within the finishing touches, the overall tone adjustment and warmth is a little strong for me. Within the warmth, I'll just go ahead and open that up and maybe take that down to about 0.03 instead. And within my tone, I'll open that up. The tone within Topaz Adjust is a quad tone. If you want to know more about that specifically, we have several sessions on our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/topazlabs that goes into this particular technology. It's located within Topaz Adjust and within Topaz Black and White Effects, so you can check it out there and learn more about it. But one slider you definitely should know about if you find that one of the presets that have a lot of tone is just a little heavy, the tone strength within the quad tone area, it's at the very bottom. As you take that to the right, you'll bring more of your original image back in, or as you take it to the left, you'll take more of your original image out and reveal more tone. So I want to kind of take more of the original image back in. And I also want to change up the tone just a touch. So instead of having a bright white as my highlight tone, I'm going to click on it and I'm going to go to maybe a cream color. Say OK. And now my bright whites are now cream. I'll keep my color 1 region slider as black, but instead of having my shadows have this brown color or this dark orange, I'm going to make it even darker towards brown, kind of get a little bit more of a natural transition of my tones. Now in this more tangerine color, I'll go ahead and do something more like this. And now I've added the exact type of tone that I wanted into my image. Here's before, here's after. The last thing that I want to do is kind of paint out the overall effect from my image just in this lower left corner. It's just a little too strong for me. So I'm going to come up to my local adjustments, go into my brush out, Instead of using an edge-aware brush, I'm going to use a much more natural edged brush, just because I have all of this detail along the rock or the shoreline here that I just don't really want to lose. So I thought maybe doing a gradual transition from that into the grass is a better option. So I'll leave that edge-aware all the way down, take that brush size about midway up. I'll take my opacity kind of maybe about 0.3. Give myself a nice softer edged brush. And now I can come in and quickly take out some of that really harsh yellow that's bringing my attention away from the water. All right, I like. So now I can come in, and there's one more thing I want to do, and that's just add a quick vignette. There we go. So very quickly you can take an image that out of the camera has not a lot of what your original intention was or what you originally envisioned or saw in front of you. Maybe it was just bland or just didn't have a lot of oomph once you got it back into your software. You can quickly take it into Topaz Adjust and create something that has a ton of impact and really reveals a lot of color, detail, and contrast. This is a bit strong for me, so I would probably take that down just a touch in my opacity. You could also do that within Adjust, but you can quickly achieve something that you saw when you were taking the image. All right, everybody, have a great morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are, and we'll be talking to you on Thursday. Bye-bye.